Going to switch brushes now, but also in the process of switching brushes, we're going to learn a little bit more about how brushes work. So I'm going to come into the brush palette, and I'm going to come all the way down to the standard brush. Last row, click it, and then let's talk about how most brushes work. If I click on the model, I'm adding clay, or adding volume, or form, whatever you want to call it. Okay, Control Z is the undo. If you press Alt and click on the model, then you're pushing in, subtracting form, subtracting volume. There are two modes for when you're working with sculpting. You can either be using Z add or you can be using Z sub. Okay, now Z add is the one that's on for most brushes, not all, but most. And all you have to do to switch to Z sub so that you're subtracting is just press the Alt key. That's the only thing you need to do. So if you press the Alt key, then it's going to be switching from Z add to Z sub, and you'll see that. I'm going to just click, now I'm going to press Alt. Click, now pressing Alt. We're going to switch brushes now, but also in the process of switching brushes, we're going to switch brushes now, but also in the process of switching brushes, we're going to learn a little bit more about how brushes work. So I'm going to come into the brush palette, and I'm going to come all the way down to the standard brush. Last row, click it, and then let's talk about how most brushes work. If I click on the model, I'm adding clay, or adding volume, or form, whatever you want to call it. Okay, Control Z is the undo. If you press Alt and click on the model, then you're pushing in, subtracting form, subtracting volume. There are two modes for when you're working with sculpting. You can either be using Z add, or you can be using Z sub. Okay, now Z add is the one that's on for most brushes, not all, but most. And all you have to do to switch to Z sub so that you're subtracting is just press the Alt key. That's the only thing you need to do. So if you press the Alt key, then it's going to be switching from Z add to Z sub, and you'll see that. I'm going to just click, now I'm going to press Alt. Click, now pressing Alt. And now we have added, subtracted, added, subtracted. Another thing to keep in mind, press the Shift key, and notice that your mouse goes, or your cursor goes blue. Now you're in the smooth brush mode. Press Shift, and you're smoothing everything out. And this is the first introduction to how sculpting really works inside of ZBrush. I'm going to undo all of those moves. The primary way that you're going to sculpt inside of ZBrush is that you might add form in a particular area, subtract, and smooth. I'm going to demo that. I'm going to map out where I'm going to add and subtract those so you can get a sense of things in advance. I'm going to add some form here. I might add a little form in there. I'm going to subtract right along that red line, and I'm going to be smoothing out all along the borders of every stroke that I make. So let's add form. Okay, let's subtract form. I'm subtracting now, getting the orbit of the eye in there. Okay, and notice that it does tend to get a little tricky pretty quick. I'm separating the superciliary arch from the frontal eminence, and we're sculpting a male character, so I would avoid sculpting a female if you can help it. It just makes things much harder. And let's press Alt. I'm going to really try to get that zygomatic bone. And notice how faceted everything is. It's just all... You're going to look at this and your first impulse is going to be, I did something wrong. you didn't, you're doing something right. This is what you want to see for a little while. Okay, I'm going to carve in. I'm going to carve in at the side of the nose, underneath the nose, carve in at the lips, and that actually was fairly successful. But all I did, oops, undo that. All I did was just carve a line in right there. I just pressed Alt and click, 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 click. That's it. That's all I did. I got lucky with having the topology lines like that. Carve underneath that lip and into the corner. Okay, that's a little trick I want to show you right now. One of the ways that I do lower lips is I'll carve underneath the lip, and then I'll carve all the way around into the corner of the mouth. And so then I get my lip, as well as some nice planes to establish the bottom part of the orbicularis oculi. Oris, sorry, not the eye muscle. Bottom part of the mouth muscle. Alright, and that also sets me up with something that's called the marionette line. Alright, this is part anatomy lesson, part sculpting. Bear with me and pick up what you can. So here I've got this guy pretty blocked in, and it looks very messy. Let's put, I'm pressing Alt and I'm just cutting in between the brow there. Alright, that's a good place to be, a very good place to be. Now I'm going to press Shift, my cursor is blue, and I'm going to smooth out with a certain specificity. So that stroke I just made is actually really important, and I want to make sure you're familiar with it and that you understand exactly what I did. So if I'm looking at my stroke, I'm going to put it in, let's put it in green. This is where I was carving in. That's the primary direction that I carved, is these strokes in green. Now the area in white is what I'm going to come in and smooth. So I'm going to smooth up to the green line. But what I do not do is cross that green line. I do not cross where my brush stroke was, where the focus of my plane changes. Don't cross it, because if you cross it, then you basically destroy form. So the key is to just smooth up to the edge and then stop. Let me demo that again. Shift, I'm smoothing up to the edge. So you see I've just got to here. I've got to travel a little bit farther. And I'm being careful. And there we go. Done. And I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. But notice that I left this intact. I did not change that plane change. I want that plane change there. It's a very important plane change. That's the cheek, the zygomatic bone. Okay? I'm going to come in and smooth out forehead additions I put in. Temporal line. Now in terms of the overhang and this temporal line, the temporal line is going out in green. The overhang is in red. What's called the supraorbital margin is in red. I'm going to try to flatten this into just a simple triangular plane. So my brush stroke is going to click in the center and then just move around a little bit. Shift, click, and move around a little bit. I'm also going to smooth that out. Okay, same thing. And smoothing out simplifies your topology. I shouldn't say your topology. It simplifies all the polygons there. So that's really nice. And you want that. You don't want a lot of craziness, but you need to be okay with some. And it's a moving target. You're going to get much more comfortable with all this as we progress. Okay, so let me review what we did. We used the standard brush. Alright, and then we used Z-add, but mostly Z-sub. And Z-sub is done by you pressing Alt. And then we pressed Shift to select the smooth. You could call it smooth mode, but basically what it does is it shifts over to a smooth brush. And we then smoothed intelligently, and it's really important that I emphasize this. This is one of the first skills you want to learn, is how to smooth intelligently. You want the smooth brush to be your finger, and you want it to have a sense of form and to be something that develops form with you. So that's the basics of sculpting. And now in the next lecture we're going to go a touch further and look at how we can start to divide the model and work with its resolution.